The gunshots started at 3:47 a.m. Three armed men kicked down the coffee shop door, expecting an easy target. What they found instead was a man who'd been waiting for this moment for 20 years. By sunrise, the neighborhood would finally understand why Santos Coffee had been avoided by cartels for over a decade. Welcome to Hidden Warriors. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. Santos Coffee sat on the corner of 5th and Mesa in Phoenix. For 15 years, Miguel Santos had owned this small shop that served the best coffee in the neighborhood. He arrived every morning at 5 a.m., unlocked the door, and began his routine with clockwork precision. The locals loved him. Mrs. Rodriguez brought her grandchildren every Saturday for hot chocolate. Detective Morrison stopped by twice a week for black coffee, extra shot. Construction workers knew Miguel would have their orders ready before they finished crossing the street. But there were things about Miguel that even loyal customers never noticed. The way his eyes tracked every passing vehicle. How he positioned himself to see both the front door and back exit. The small scars on his knuckles that spoke of different work. And there was something else. The Hermanos cartel controlled 3 of the 4 blocks around Santos Coffee, collecting protection money from every business. Except one. They never approached Miguel. Drug dealers who operated 2 streets away would cross to the opposite sidewalk rather than walk past his shop. When cartel members drove through, they'd slow down, see the coffee shop, and accelerate past without stopping. It wasn't random. The older cartel members remembered whispers about a man who had once worked for the Sinaloa organization. A man responsible for eliminating problems that required precision and patience. They remembered a name that had vanished from Mexico 20 years ago. Carlos El Fantasma Mendoza. The ghost. Miguel's transformation from lethal operative to neighborhood coffee shop owner had been carefully orchestrated with new documents, a clean financial history, and most importantly, the discipline to never slip back into old habits. He had mastered the art of being forgettable, unremarkable, just another middle-aged immigrant running a small business. Every smile was genuine, every conversation authentic, every cup of coffee made with pride. But beneath this perfect facade, muscle memory remained intact, waiting patiently for the day someone would force him to remember who he used to be. Eduardo Herrera, current leader of the Phoenix Hermanos, had inherited more than territory. He had inherited warnings about certain individuals who were not to be touched. Eduardo's father, Roberto, had worked with the Sinaloa cartel during the 1990s. Roberto had never met El Fantasma personally, but he had been present when the ghost services were discussed and confirmed completed. "There are some people you leave alone," Roberto had told his son. "The coffee shop on 5th Street, the owner is not to be touched. Not approached for payments, not bothered for any reason." "Why?" young Eduardo had asked. "Because 20 years ago, that man could kill you in your sleep without leaving a trace, and 20 years of making coffee doesn't erase that kind of training. For 15 years, this agreement held. Miguel served coffee, minded his business, and the Hermanos pretended his shop existed in neutral territory. But Rico Valdez was 23 and had been dealing for the Hermanos for 2 years. He was ambitious, frustrated by what he saw as excessive caution from older members. His partners, Javier and Luis, were even younger, eager to prove themselves. "It doesn't make sense," Rico told them after watching Miguel lock up alone. "Eduardo says never touch that place, but why? Because some old-timers think the guy used to be dangerous. Look at him. He's probably 70, moves like his back hurts." They planned for 3 days. Simple robbery. Get in, take whatever cash he keeps, get out. What could possibly go wrong? The 3 young men had grown up in an era where cartel violence was flashy, public, designed to intimidate through spectacle rather than precision. They had never encountered the old-school operatives who worked in complete silence, leaving no witnesses, no evidence, no stories to tell. To them, danger looked like gold chains, automatic weapons, and social media posts. They couldn't recognize the far deadlier threat of a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of invisible violence, who understood that the most effective killers were the ones nobody ever suspected. At 3:47 a.m., Miguel's Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot. Rico approached from the front with lockpicks, while Javier moved through the alley. Luis positioned himself across the street as lookout. The locks were old, easy to defeat. They entered simultaneously, expecting to find the shop empty. Instead, they found Miguel Santos standing behind the counter, perfectly still, hands visible, expression completely calm. He wasn't surprised. He had been waiting. "Gentlemen," Miguel said quietly, "you are making a very serious mistake." Rico raised his .38 revolver. "The only mistake, old man, is you being here. Get down on the ground, now." Miguel didn't move. His eyes tracked Javier's position, calculated Luis's location outside, assessed the weapons. When he spoke again, his voice carried something colder. 20 years of serving coffee and minding my own business. 20 years of hoping this day would never come. Miguel's hands moved beneath the counter. Instead of cash or a panic button, his fingers found something else. The Glock 19 with suppressor was exactly where he had left it 15 years ago. Loaded, safety off, ready to fire. "I tried very hard to retire," Miguel said, his accent now distinctly different from the friendly shop owner. "But some ghosts refused to stay buried." Rico realized something had changed when Miguel's posture shifted completely. The mild-mannered shop owner disappeared, replaced by someone whose stance suggested years of training, where hesitation meant death. "Last chance," Miguel said, finger on the trigger. "Walk away. Pretend this never happened. Everyone lives." Rico made his choice. He fired first. Miguel had been tracking micro-expressions, body language, the subtle tightening of Rico's grip that preceded the trigger pull. He had moved before the young man's brain had finished sending the signal to his finger. This wasn't luck or quick reflexes. This was the result of thousands of hours of training in environments where reading intent correctly meant the difference between completing a mission and becoming a casualty. The friendly coffee shop owner had been a perfect mask, but underneath, every instinct that had kept Carlos Mendoza alive through a decade of the most dangerous work imaginable remained sharp and ready. The bullet shattered the mirror behind the espresso machine, but missed Miguel entirely. By the time the echo faded, El Fantasma had returned. What happened next took less than 2 minutes. Miguel's suppressed Glock made barely more sound than a book dropping. Rico dropped immediately, his weapon clattering across the tile. Javier, entering through the back door, heard the sound and quickened his pace. He found Miguel waiting in the narrow hallway. The second shot was equally precise, equally final. Luis, still outside, heard nothing. The suppressor and thick brick walls contained everything. He waited by the window, watching for his signal, unaware that his partners were already dead. Miguel moved through his shop with fluid precision of someone who had performed similar actions in dangerous circumstances. He checked both bodies, confirmed they carried no identification, noted the cheap weapons that marked them as amateurs. Then he pulled out a phone that hadn't been used in over a decade. The call was answered on the second ring. "Santos," said a voice with Colombian accent. "It's Miguel. I have a problem. 2 down inside, 1 outside. Hermanos soldiers." "Clean?" "Always clean. But this changes things. They know where I am now." "How long do you need?" 6 hours. For Luis, Miguel made a different choice. Instead of elimination, he used a pressure point technique that left the young man unconscious but breathing. He zip-tied him and left a note. "Tell Eduardo that El Fantasma sends his regards. Some agreements should not be broken." The cleanup crew that arrived within the hour operated with the same efficiency Miguel remembered from his active years. They worked in complete silence, using industrial-grade solvents and specialized equipment that left no forensic trace. These weren't common criminals covering up a botched robbery. These were professionals who understood that certain problems required surgical removal from reality. Within 4 hours, Rico and Javier had simply ceased to exist. Their bodies dissolved in acid, their weapons melted down, their presence erased as thoroughly as if they had never been born. By 6 a.m., Santos' coffee looked exactly as it always had. The broken mirror was replaced, bullet holes patched and painted, blood cleaned with industrial solvents that left no trace. Rico and Javier had simply vanished, their bodies removed by professionals who asked no questions. Miguel opened at his usual time, greeting morning customers with his usual smile. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived for her grandson's hot chocolate. Detective Morrison got his black coffee with extra shot. Neither noticed that Miguel's hands were steadier than usual, his eyes more alert. At 9:15 a.m., Eduardo Herrera received the phone call that changed everything. Luis had been found wandering with severe concussion and no memory. The note pinned to his shirt was brief, but unmistakable. Eduardo called his father immediately. The conversation lasted 2 hours and ended with new orders to every soldier under his command. Santos Coffee and the 3-block radius around it were to be considered neutral territory. Forever. Rico and Javier were never reported missing. In the criminal world, soldiers disappear for many reasons, and asking questions about the wrong disappearance can be hazardous. Miguel continued serving coffee, maintaining his routine, treating customers with the same warmth they had always known. But something fundamental had changed. The careful balance he had maintained for 15 years had been broken, and certain people now knew exactly who he was. The neighborhood still doesn't know the truth about their friendly coffee shop owner. They don't know about the bodies that disappeared or the cartels that give his shop a wide berth. They just know Miguel makes the best coffee in Phoenix and always remembers their orders. But now you know the truth. Have you ever met someone ordinary who turned out to be extraordinary? Share their story in the comments, and subscribe to Hidden Warriors for more stories of everyday heroes hiding in plain sight. Some people serve their country in uniform, others serve in silence, 1 cup of coffee at a time. Within a week, the word had spread through every criminal network in the Southwest. El Fantasma wasn't just a legend, he was alive, active, and protecting his territory with the same lethal efficiency that had made him famous decades earlier. Old-school cartel leaders who remembered the stories nodded knowingly, while younger criminals learned a harsh lesson about the difference between reputation and reality. Miguel Santos could return to his peaceful retirement, but everyone now understood that beneath the apron and friendly smile lived a ghost who could still kill without hesitation when his carefully constructed world was threatened.